Hey guys, tonight we travel far from the marble halls and candlelit banquets of Europe, out into the windswept steppes of Central Asia, where the horizon stretches so wide it almost swallows you whole. You're wrapped in layers of felt and fur, your breath rising in little clouds, and there's only one thing standing between you and freezing into a human popsicle: tea! Not the dainty floral kind with lemon slices, but the thick, salty, buttery lifeblood of the Mongol Empire. You probably wouldn't survive your first sip without politely choking on it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night settles heavy over the grasslands, and you can almost feel the hum of the earth underfoot. A campfire flickers ahead where a circle of riders huddle around a soot-blackened kettle. The smell is smoky, earthy, like burnt hay mixed with milk. That, my friend, is the scent of Mongol tea. Not served in porcelain cups, but in wooden bowls passed from hand to hand. It's less about taste, more about warmth, about staying alive when the wind claws through your tent and your bones feel hollow. Tea to the Mongols wasn't born in luxury or leisure. It was survival fuel, made from bricks of compressed leaves traded from China, crumbled into boiling water, thickened with milk, sometimes even a bit of animal fat or salt. It's not exactly what your local barista would call a latte, but in the 13th century, it kept warriors and herders moving across continents. Historians still argue whether Mongol tea culture developed independently or absorbed influences from Tang-era Chinese courts. What's clear is that this was not a gentle ceremony with porcelain pots and fans. It was a roaring kettle on a smoky fire, somewhere between chaos and comfort. You didn't pour tea, you ladled. You didn't sip, you slurped, and nobody apologized for it. Picture yourself kneeling inside a yurt, the felt walls trembling.
Hearth burns in the center, and above you, a round opening to the sky, half smoke hole, half celestial window. Someone hands you a wooden bowl of tea. The liquid is thick and beige, a blend of mare's milk and boiled tea bricks. You take a cautious sip, expecting bitterness, but it's oddly soothing, rich, savory, the kind of taste that makes your shoulders drop. One of the elders beside you laughs softly. To refuse the bowl would have been an insult, a small social disaster. Mongol hospitality revolved around tea. A sign of peace, of safety. You could cross half the known world, step into a stranger's tent, and the first thing offered to you would be that steaming bowl. There's a rhythm to it. The soft clink of ladles, the murmured toasts, the quiet of the step between each swallow. The Mongols drank tea at dawn before battle, at dusk to end the day, during births, funerals, and deals between tribes. You start to realize this isn't just a drink. It's a way of binding moments together, a ritual that makes the endless grasslands feel like home. A scholar once wrote that the Mongols conquered half the world, but bowed before a bowl of tea. And as you sit there, letting the warmth creep into your chest, you start to understand why. There's something hypnotic in the way the steam rises and dissolves into the air, like watching history breathe. By the end of your first bowl, you're drowsy from the fire and the sound of wind outside. The kettle bubbles again, refilled, eternal. Somewhere out there, a horse nickers and the camp settles into sleep. You realize that in this quiet, wild place, tea isn't just a drink, it's a heartbeat. Morning on the steppe doesn't really arrive, it just seeps in. The horizon lightens to a dull gold, and the frost on your boots begins to melt. You stir awake to the hiss of another fire being stoked, another kettle being set down. By now, you know the sound, a low, bubbling promise of warmth. The camp smell changes with it, smoke, leather, horse sweat, and that unmistakable tang of milk tea. You peer into the pot and watch as the morning's brew begins. The process looks casual, almost careless, but every motion is deliberate. A handful of tea brick shavings are tossed in. These bricks, traded from Chinese merchants along the caravan routes, were once worth their weight in silver. They weren't just for drinking, they were currency. You could pay a debt, buy a horse, even court favor with a well-aged brick of tea. That's how vital it was. Next, a scoop of dried mare's milk called arul drops in. It softens, curling like white ribbons in the steaming water. Then comes salt. Yes, salt. A pinch, sometimes a handful. It sounds like culinary madness, but it kept the body hydrated in brutal climates and replenished lost minerals after long rides. The result is a liquid that's both soup and tea, a drink hearty enough to keep you alive when your world is mostly wind and grass. Historians still argue whether this salty brew came from Tibetan influence or was a Mongol invention born of necessity. Either way, it became a trademark. Tea, not as refinement, but resilience. As the tea simmers, you notice the kettle itself. It's not some polished copper showpiece, but a blackened cauldron scarred from years of use. Mongols often passed these kettles down generations, and there was superstition in them. Never wash the inside completely clean. The residue, they said, carried the spirit of family and fortune. Modern historians call that seasoning. The Mongols called it luck. The eldest woman in the tent begins to stir the pot using a ladle carved from ox horn. Her wrists move slowly, rhythmically, like a priestess performing a quiet ritual. No one speaks over her. The air fills with the rich scent of butter melting into tea. You can hear the occasional soft cluck of approval, like music from a world that has forgotten the concept of hurry. Then, the pouring begins. You're handed your bowl again, warm and solid in your hands. You notice the etiquette this time. The oldest drinks first, then guests, then the host. No one gulps. Even though the tea isn't fancy, it's treated with reverence, a shared moment of respect between humans and the harsh land they inhabit. As you sip, the host tells you a story, how Genghis Khan himself was said to start his day with salted milk tea before issuing commands. There's no proof, of course, but the image sticks. A warlord with a bowl of comfort in one hand and the fate of nations in the other. A gentle, ironic contrast that feels almost too human to be true.
Another story claims Mongol warriors carried dried tea bricks and fermented milk on campaigns. They'd boil water in helmets if needed. Yes, helmets, and make impromptu tea even on the edge of battle. You imagine that? An empire built partly on the fuel of hot, salty tea? Somewhere in history, that fact alone deserves a toast. You take another sip and realize it's grown on you. The odd flavor, the creamy saltiness. The first bowl was shock, but the second is comfort. You even understand why no one uses sugar. Sweetness is fleeting here. Salt endures. Outside, the camp begins to move. Horses are saddled, children laugh, and traders from distant lands approach with camels carrying more bricks of tea, butter, and wool. The kettle remains in the center, bubbling gently, as if guarding the soul of the tribe. You stretch, full and warm, the aftertaste clinging to your tongue like memory. In this small ritual, you glimpse the heart of an empire. Not its battles, but its mornings. And you can't help but think, in a strange way, that the Mongols conquered continents powered by nothing more than milk, salt. By midday, the camp is shifted into rhythm. horses grazing lazily, traders unpacking wares, and the faint clang of metal somewhere in the distance. But inside one large felt tent, something quieter unfolds. You step in, ducking under the doorway flap, and your eyes adjust to the dim golden light. This isn't just a meal, it's a ceremony. The air hums with a kind of restrained reverence. A long carpet stretches across the ground, and people take their places in order that seems invisible at first, but follows strict logic. You sit near the edge, watching carefully. The hierarchy of the nomad's table is subtle, yet absolute. Who sits closest to the host? Who receives tea first? Even the angle at which one holds the bowl, all of it tells a story of rank, respect, and kinship. You notice that the eldest man doesn't pour his own tea. Instead, the youngest member ladles it for him, using both hands. A small but essential gesture of deference. You try to imitate it and nearly spill, earning a few quiet chuckles. Someone murmured,
Mongol dining etiquette wasn't written in books. It was lived, passed down by repetition. Every motion reinforced harmony within the tribe. The tea ceremony, if you can call it that, wasn't a performance for outsiders. It was an act of belonging. To sip carelessly or refuse tea could brand you as impolite, or worse, distrustful. For nomads who depended on one another for survival, etiquette was survival too. One mainstream fact often surprises modern historians. Mongols rarely ate in silence. Meals were lively affairs, full of chatter, gossip, and sometimes impromptu singing. But when the tea was poured, voices softened. For those few minutes, the focus was communal, on the drink, the warmth, and the delicate act of sharing. A bowl of tea is passed to you again. The host nods, waiting for you to accept with your right hand, always the right hand. The left was considered impure, used for less ceremonial tasks. You raise the bowl, bow slightly, and sip. The flavor hasn't changed, but it feels different now, deeper somehow, because of the weight of eyes watching, approving. There's even superstition here. Spill a drop of tea on the ground, and someone quickly flicks a few drops after it, an offering to the spirits of the land. Historians still argue whether this gesture came from shamanic belief or early Buddhist influence, but either way, it links every sip to something larger than hunger or thirst. A young woman begins ladling more tea, humming a tune. The melody loops softly, hypnotically, blending with the hiss of the kettle. The song tells of a traveler lost in a snowstorm, saved when a stranger shared a bowl of hot tea. The moral is obvious. Generosity keeps the steppe alive. You glance at the utensils spread across the rug. Wooden bowls, horn spoons, sometimes even small silver cups traded from China. There's a kind of accidental elegance to it all. Mongol nobles, despite their reputation for conquest, loved finely made objects. Some accounts say that when they sacked cities, they collected not gold or silk, but teapots. Imagine that, an empire of horsemen hoarding kettles. Still, the ritual remains grounded. No incense, no pomp, just fire, milk, and motion. Makes Mongol tea cultures so unique. It's not about perfection, but participation. Everyone drinks, everyone shares. Even the humblest herder has a seat at the invisible table of the steppe. The host raises his bowl and the others follow. You do too. There's no formal toast, just a few murmured blessings. To warmth, to horses, to good weather. Simple, ancient prayers wrapped in steam. And as you sip, your mind drifts. The kettle pops softly, the fire crackles, and the rhythm of life here feels both fragile and eternal. You realize something quietly profound. Civilization isn't built only by stone or sword. Sometimes it's built by the steady passing of a single bowl of tea, hand to hand, heart to heart.
Evening settles again, and this time the fire burns brighter. You can feel the empire itself stretching outward beyond this campfire, west toward Persia, east toward China, north toward the snows of Siberia. And everywhere the Mongol riders go, they carry one constant: the ritual of tea. It's strange to think of it, but tea may have traveled faster on horseback than any army ever could. You ride along with a caravan now, hooves thudding against frozen earth. Behind you, the steppe fades into the silk roads, that long network of trade veins pulsing with life. You pass merchants from India carrying spices, from Persia carrying carpets, from China, you guessed it, tea bricks. The Mongols didn't just conquer, they connected. And in their saddlebags, tea became a universal language. When Mongol envoys reached Chinese courts, they found tea already transformed into ceremony, a delicate art of porcelain cups, flower petals, and perfumed steam. It must have felt worlds away from their smoky kettles on the grasslands. But here's the fascinating twist. The Mongols didn't reject this refinement. They absorbed it, reshaped it, and spread it again. In Yuan-era China, under Kublai Khan's rule, tea was no longer a purely southern pleasure. It became imperial, standardized, taxed, and documented. One could say that the Mongol thirst created China's first true tea bureaucracy. Historians still argue whether this cultural exchange was mutual respect or imperial appropriation. Some say the Mongols elevated tea from simple ritual to global commodity. Others argue they merely borrowed it and rode on. What's certain is that wherever their hoofprints went, the sound of boiling water followed. You picture a Mongol general in a silk-draped tent outside Samarkand, pouring salted tea for Persian nobles who pretend to like it. A few forced smiles, polite sips, and centuries later, we get a fusion of cultures that historians now trace through teapots unearthed across Eurasia. Imagine the archaeological confusion. Chinese porcelain buried beside Mongol leather flasks and Persian calligraphy. The past brewed together like an oversteeped cup. You rest by another campfire, now smaller, surrounded by traders speaking half a dozen languages. Someone tells a story about a royal envoy who crossed 5,000 miles with nothing but a satchel of tea bricks and a letter of peace. Supposedly, he was received with honors in Persia, where the Shah declared, "Any man who carries warmth deserves welcome." It's one of those legends that might never have happened, but should have. The tea tonight tastes different. Spiced with cardamom and butter, a Persian influence creeping in. You sip slowly, tracing the flavors of continents in your mouth. This drink has traveled more than most humans ever will. Each swallow is a map. And yet, amid all this exchange, something of the old steppe remains. The Mongols might have worn silk now, might have adopted finer cups, but when the kettle bubbled and the first steam rose, they still sat close together, knee to knee, just as before. Ceremony changes, meaning doesn't. A scholar once described the Mongol Empire as a network of warmth in a cold world. It sounds poetic until you realize it's literal. Tea fires linking yurts, forts, and palaces across half the globe. This was their quiet legacy, hidden beneath the noise of conquests. The night deepens. You watch sparks fly up into the dark and think about how empires usually fall apart, but tea somehow doesn't. It adapts, it lingers. And somewhere between China and the Volga River, between battlefields and bazaars, the forgotten tea ceremonies of the Mongol world slowly turned into everyone's daily ritual. You take the last sip and smile faintly. History isn't always written in blood or ink. Sometimes it's written in steam.
The final dawn arrives soft and silver. You wake to the creak of a yurt door and the sigh of wind threading through horsehair ropes. Smoke curls upward once again, the ancient signal that tea is brewing. The same song of bubbles, the same hush of waiting. It feels like centuries have passed since your first bewildered sip, yet everything here remains the same. A young herder pours water into the blackened kettle, his motions slow and confident. He's learned by watching his grandmother, who learned from hers. No written recipe, no clock, just instinct. The Mongol tea ceremony, if that word even fits, has outlasted empires because it's too humble to vanish. It doesn't need temples or gilded teapots, just fire, milk, and patience. Outside, the sun spills over the steppe, painting the grass in gold. A few yurts dot the distance like white seashells, and smoke rises from each one, tiny beacons of continuity. You realize that every puff of that smoke carries a shared memory, the warmth of a kettle, the generosity of a host, the silence before the first sip. You sit again on the worn rug, bowl in hand. The tea tastes softer today, less salt, more butter. The host tells you this is Nadam season, when communities gather for wrestling, horse racing, and archery. During these festivals, tea flows endlessly. It isn't just refreshment, it's celebration. People trade cups between songs, pour a drop for the ancestors, even mix tea into dough for luck. And yet even now, historians still argue whether the Mongols ever had what one
Could call a formal tea ceremony. Some claim it never existed, that the phrase romanticizes a simple act of drinking. Others insist the ceremony was hidden in the very simplicity, that reverence doesn't always need choreography. Both sides, in a way, are right. The truth is probably floating somewhere in that kettle, steeping quietly. You think back to everything you've seen, the salt, the hierarchy, the stories told between sips. Each detail forms part of a larger rhythm, one that pulses gently through time. Even modern Mongolian families still follow it. When a guest arrives, tea is served before any word of business. When a traveler knocks, they're welcomed with steam and milk, not suspicion. It's a culture of warmth disguised as a beverage. Your host laughs softly as you finish your bowl and hands you another. "Never drink only one," he says. "One is politeness, two is friendship." You grin and take it. The second bowl always tastes better. Maybe it's the butter, or maybe it's the way it feels to be part of something that stretches backward 1,000 years. The old kettle whistles again, the same one they've used for decades, maybe longer. Its handle is wrapped in cloth, its bottom scorched black. But when the lid lifts, the steam that rises could be from any century. It blurs time, connecting khans and herders, travelers and storytellers. You breathe it in slowly, eyes half closed. The scent is familiar now, comforting. A smell of home, even if it isn't yours. You start to understand why people say that Mongol tea doesn't just warm the body, it warms the memory. Because every time it's poured, the past joins the circle. And as you sit there, bowl cradled in your hands, the landscape hums around you. The horses snort, the wind sighs, the fire murmurs, everything in balance. You realize you've been telling not just the story of tea, but of endurance, hospitality, and quiet joy. The things empires forget, but humanity remembers. The story begins to fade now, like steam thinning into air. The fire's crackle softens. The voices around you blur into a single calm murmur. You can almost feel the rhythm of your own breathing, matching the slow, steady simmer of that ancient kettle. If you listen closely, the steppe is still speaking, a whisper carried by the wind across centuries. It tells of riders and traders, of tents glowing with warmth, of tea shared without words. The empire has long since fallen, but the tea remains, patient and unchanged, waiting quietly for anyone who needs it. Your thoughts drift with the sound of the bubbling pot. The scent of milk and smoke lingers in the air, wrapping you in something gentler than sleep. Even history feels drowsy now, its sharp edges rounding off into a haze of comfort. You picture the horizon, wide and endless, and in that space you find stillness. The last traces of daylight stretch like silk threads over the hills. You can almost see the ghosts of campfires twinkling in the distance, each one an echo of laughter, conversation, and warmth. You take one last imaginary sip, slow, steady, peaceful. The warmth fills your chest, spreads through your limbs, and melts into the quiet around you. The kettle sighs, the fire hums, and the steppe, vast and eternal, drifts away into silence. Sleep well, traveler. The tea will still be waiting for you in the morning.